Welcome to Social Work Live at Columbia University School of Social Work. My name is Michael Friedman, and I teach health policy and mental health policy here at the school. On this show, we interview somebody from the school's community every week to talk about what's new in social work practice and to discuss sometimes some controversial issues. We will be talking for about 15 minutes and then open up for questions, and you can enter comments into the comments section of the Facebook page that you're looking at. Our guest today is Neeraj Kaushal, who is a professor here and an economist and a woman of rather enormous achievement, and who has a book coming out in January of 2019, and it is, I'm sure, a terrific book. I'm looking forward to reading it once it comes out, and many of you may want to look at it. I understand they can get a 30% discount if they do it the right way. How do they do that?
Well, they go to the Columbia University Press website. There's a code they can use.
Okay, so go to the Columbia University Press website, and you can get 30% off, and it'll be out in January. And we're going to talk about immigration. The book is Blaming Immigrants, great title, nationalism, a word that's in the news lately, and the economics of the global movement. So we want to talk about these immigration issues today. And in fact, we had a question that came in even before we started about the caravan in Mexico and what's going on there. And they just wanted to get your take on it. What do you think?
So I've object to the term invasion used for immigration. Immigration is primarily movement of people where they move for economic opportunities to better their life. It is not related with any kind of invasion. When you think about this caravan of people coming from Central America, they are basically escaping poverty, they are escaping civil war in the countries they're coming from, and they're escaping violence. I understand that when you say something like 5,000 or 10,000, you have to look at that number in perspective. Every year, the United States receives close to 1 million people who become permanent residents.
1 million.
1 million. More than that, we have another 1.5 million to 2 million who actually come here as temporary workers or as students. So the United States, because of its booming economy over the years, has attracted a lot of people. Unfortunately, we never want to know that people are leaving the country. So there's a constant moving out as well. We don't believe that why would anybody like to leave the United States? That's how we think.
So 5,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 is not a very big number.
It's a tiny number, yes.
An invasion, of course, is some sort of metaphor. I don't know whether President Trump understands that it's a metaphor, but it is at best a metaphor, but it's a rather small invasion, even metaphorically speaking. And what do you think about putting troops on the border to deal with this?
That's an overreaction. Whether these people are coming, they're seeking asylum. They're not invading. They're if they were sneaking into the country without anybody knowing about it, then you might need more enforcement to actually check on them. These people you can see that they're coming. It's in the news every day. So it's at best an overreaction. At worst, this is not how we should be addressing.
Can you say a word about the rules related to asylum in this country?
Well, we have signed the UN Convention on Refugees, so we have ratified it. So we have to actually look into allow these people and give them a recourse to law, look at their cases.
So this is a requirement of law, international law, and
which we have accepted.
Which we have accepted.
Yeah.
And so this effort that's going on now from the Trump administration is a violation of, potential violation of international law.
Yes, and the thing is, the objective is to create fear in the minds of the people. Objective is to distort a reality.
So let's talk
migration.
a little bit about that, because I think quite right that there's a lot of distortion of reality that's going on. There's a perception of people who are trying to come to this country that they are criminals, that they are, if they get here and they're not criminals, they're just going to become people who use the welfare benefits of this country and don't make any kind of contribution, that they're taking more than they're giving. What do you think of that?
So, all economists across, whether they are liberal or they are conservative, they agree on one thing, that immigration makes a positive impact on the U.S. economy, on the world economy. So, give you a number, only 3% of the world population lives away from their country of birth. Now, how much do they contribute to the global GDP? One study shows that they contribute 9% to the global GDP.
So that's triple.
That's triple, yes. So,
and in the United States, when people immigrate to the United States, are they likely to go on welfare benefits? Do they get Social Security benefits?
So, depends on who we are talking about. There are legal immigrants, those who are citizens are eligible for receiving benefits, receiving safety net benefits. Those who are not citizens, some of them are eligible, some are not. Depends on what stage of life they arrive. It depends on their economic well-being, their education levels. Some of them do receive benefits, but once you adjust for their economic situations, you see that immigrants are much, much less likely to receive benefits than the native population.
And my understanding is that if you look at the economics of it, that they're putting more money into the economy than they're taking out of the economy.
So yeah, as I said, that they do make positive contribution. Now the question is, is anybody hurt by immigration? Is there in the labor market? So if more doctors come to the United States, they improve health conditions in the United States of people. They provide health care, right? On the other hand, you might actually say that some doctors would, their economic conditions would be, they would face more competition from foreigners. So it depends on what you're looking at.
Yeah.
A tiny minority would be affected adversely. A large majority is going to be affected positively. So you have to, when you look at immigration, you have to look at the totality of all the impacts, the positives as well as the negative. Oftentimes we only focus on the negative impacts and we don't focus on the huge positive impact.
Well, that's certainly what's been happening lately.
Yes.
And it gets a lot of headlines because it's coming from our president. You're talking about people who are in the healthcare profession at the top level, the people who are doctors who are coming here. And given the fact that we have a shortage of doctors here, I work on mental health particularly, and we have a dire shortage of psychiatrists, child psychiatrists, geriatric psychiatrists, and even general psychiatrists. Having immigrants who can do that is enormously helpful. But there are other levels of work in the field of healthcare, and it seems to me that we rely heavily on immigrants to be nurses' aides, to be home health workers. And, am I right about that?
Yeah, so immigrants are a huge proportion of our workforce, and the interesting thing is that because of the demographic trends that we see in the past, in the last quarter century, half of the increase in labor force in the United States was because of immigration. Half. And in the next 25 years, almost all the growth in labor force would be because of immigrants or their children. So you can see the kind of impact immigration has or will have, and how necessary immigration is.
So if our nation cuts back on immigration, which is apparently what the nation intends to do, at least between now and 2020, but that's where the current administration is going, that's a real threat to the future economy of this country.
It does. It does. Will have an impact on the economy in the sense that the labor force would be restricted. that the growth in labor, we have managed to stay a relatively young nation as compared to many countries of the world, as compared to many European countries, as compared to Japan, where they have decided not to have any immigration. And because of that, for almost more than 2 decades, the country is in a kind of an economic coma because of many other factors, but also the fact that they have a highly fast-growing aging population. And you could say that about many European countries as well. We have been lucky because of the legacy of immigration. Because of that legacy, despite what we see in the current administration, there is also a lot of positive feeling about immigration.
So this is really an international issue. It's not just an issue in the United States, from what you're saying. You mentioned a number of countries. I talk all the time about the aging of America. Here I am, the aging of America. But there are, of course, an enormous number of people my age and more every day. And so there's a lot of concern about where the workforce is going to come from. I'm familiar with some of those numbers, so over the next couple of decades, we expect older people to grow to be 25% of the population. It'll be more than the population of children under 18, and the working age population is going to decline by 5%. So who's going to be the working age population? Answer, immigrants, right? But if we cut that off, that could have a really devastating impact on the growth of the American economy, I would think.
Yes, many countries, in response to that, countries as different as China. A few decades ago, China was worried about its population problem, right? Remember, they had the one-child policy.
Yes, yes.
And now they are concerned about shrinking of their working age population. So in another 25 to 30 years, China's working age population is expected to decline by 150 million people.
Wow. And are they opening their borders to immigrants?
Selectively.
Really?
So China has tried to follow the US example to have something called a China green card. So they have a green card in Beijing and they have a green card in Shanghai, not all across the country, but in these two. And they are very concerned about. I have been, consulting with them, and they have told me that scarcity of talent is the biggest threat they see to their economic vitality. That's globally. Everywhere people see that scarcity of working age population would be the biggest threat.
So you mentioned Japan and you mentioned some of the European countries. China seems to be inching towards opening up a little bit it sometimes strikes me we've got millions of refugees who are coming out of Syria and other parts of the Middle East and out of Africa and sub-Saharan Africa and places where there's war and terrible, terrible economic situations. And then we've got countries that need to have a young workforce, but they're not, for the most part, gladly opening their doors. Germany did, and now the politics of Germany have shifted. We hear about changes in Sweden and so forth. I wonder what your thoughts are about what's going on.
So immigration is a hot-button issue. Yeah. Politically, it's like changing politics of electoral politics, not just in Europe, but in many Asian countries as well. A few years ago, Singaporeans were talking about, we want Singapore for Singaporeans. So many parts, even in India, where I come from, the ruling party has said we would not we would create a fence around Bangladesh so that not even a bird could fly across. So these sentiments towards against immigration are growing in many parts of the world. We've seen that in Europe, country after country after country. You see the emergence of a far-right political party. And the liberal parties have also, many of them have become far more conservative. And the question is it immigration? All these conservative parties would like to say that immigrants are the villains. They are the question is, are they really to be blamed, or are they the scapegoat? That's one question I address in my book.
And let's remind everyone, this book is coming out in January, and You can get it for 30% off at the Columbia University Press website, and it deals with the issues that we're talking about, including this fundamental question of whether the movement of people from the nation where they're born to other nations is creating problems that they're being blamed for. And your sense is
that it's immigrants are just the scapegoat. And I'll give you an example for it's so one of the things that I say in my book is that it's not really immigration per se. It's not the size of immigrant population in a country or a city that is causing these discontents, but it is basically appetite of nations, ability of nations, as well as their ability to absorb foreigners, as well as their ability to manage them, that is causing these discontents. And I'll give you a few examples. Let's start with just the United States. New York, we are sitting here in New York. We love our immigrants. This is one of the states, as well as the cities in the country, that has one of the largest population of immigrants. And the number of immigrants have kept rising here. Mm-hmm. But we love them. We have, just a few years ago, the mayor had started an ID card. To basically, the primary aim, in his own words, was to actually welcome undocumented immigrants. That is true about many other cities in this country. The places where we see anger towards immigrants are places or cities that have very few immigrants. North Dakota, there are not any immigrants, but they are against immigration. So in the United States, you see places where there's places and cities and states that have not received many immigrants. That's where you see the most anger. Same paradox prevails all over the world.
Well, that's really interesting. So what's driving that anger? Do you have speculation about? I know you're an economist and not a psychologist or a sociologist, but do you have any speculation about what's breeding this anger in people?
I think there are other factors. It's easy, convenient to blame the foreigner, for the other fundamental causes of problems that are within a population or the economy of this. So in this book, I look at 7 different causes of growing fundamental problems in Western societies. And the objective there is to see whether any one of them is because of immigration. And I reached the conclusion that immigration can actually solve some of the problems.
Interesting. Can you tick off the 7 very quickly in one sentence for each
okay,
each
so
of them?
Nationalism or identity politics is the primary one. Again, is it really more people, more foreigners that are causing this problem, or is it something else? Is it because of the growing number of foreigners that people are, or is it the is it the foreignness of them? I'll give you an example about the most recent example about Venezuelan refugees. The size of Venezuelan refugees is as large or almost as large as the size of Syrian refugees. Mm-hmm. And remember how the media was going about it, how Europe shrunk at the approach of Syrian refugees, how the entire Europe, they created like a fortress. Whereas we can all learn a lot from how Latin American countries are responding.
Well, maybe we can come back to this. I'm really interested in this, but we do have at least one question on the screen here. I think there are 2 questions. The first question is, if you could create your own ideal immigration policy for the United States, what changes would you make?
The primary change that I would make is create a large number of, actually 2 changes. Maybe by the end of it I'll have more changes, but primary 2. One, create a large number of visa categories for people with all spectrum of skills and education categories. Currently we have a sort of well-functioning system for professionals, but we don't have similar categories for other groups. The second thing I think that we need to think hard and is how do you address the issue of enforcement? Is the enforcement system working? Is increasing expenditures on people by the government to restrict immigration at the border, is that working? That's something we really need to think about. We need to think about what should be the metric of success for an enforcement policy. So these are the two main things that I think we need to address.
Somebody would like to know if you're going to do a reading or a signing at the release of your book. As an immigrant, whoever's asking this question, he or she, says I would be very interested and excited to pre-order a copy. So are you going to do a reading someplace?
Well, sure. I haven't thought about it, but okay. Yeah, I see that there's demand, so I would.
Well, time to do it. Let's set it up at Columbia.
Okay.
Right? We'll get a bunch of books from the publisher, and you can do a reading
that's an
here.
encouraging comment.
Let's press for that. Okay. And there's another question. Can you tell us more about immigration and immigration policies between Latin America countries? That's an interesting question. I was in Chile last year at this time, and there were quite a number of people who had come from Venezuela to Chile. It was really striking, people working in the stores and elsewhere who had made the trek to get from Venezuela to Chile. But
yes, so President Trump has said that the United States is the only country that allows citizenship by birth of people who were born of foreign born parents. That's not true. Many Latin American countries allow that. Many Latin American countries also allow free mobility of people within Latin American countries, and they also allow them to get residency status.
Is there another question there? Yes. Somebody says, I'd like to know what role social workers can play in U.S. immigration policy. Aren't they in a difficult position? Gee, I wish we could ask what the questioner means by that. But what do you think about the role of social workers in dealing with immigration issues in the United States?
I mean, I think social workers, wouldn't you agree, have played a major role around this crisis at the border. Social workers have been actually a major force of advocacy for children who have been separated from their parents.
Right.
Social work plays major role in many aspects of it.
So this gets really interesting. The advocacy part of it, I would love to talk about, since much of my career has been about advocacy, and that's certainly true. But social workers have also been playing a role as children are separated from their parents.
Mm-hmm.
Social workers and social work organizations have taken the children in. And there's been some controversy about that. On the one hand, it's a humane reaction to a terrible situation, and if somebody's got to take care of these children, right? And then the critics have said, but this is it's a terrible policy, and by taking children in, we're supporting it in some way, and social work agencies are profiting on the suffering of the children and their families. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, the thing is, there are times when social workers basically react to a situation, right? We provide services. A lot of us are at the policy table. I mean, have been in the past.
Yeah.
This current situation is very different, but I think the advocacy work that social workers do, and also other organizations, Latino organizations that also have social workers as part of them. They have been, going around informing Latino population about their voting rights, increasing voters registration. That's changing demography of the United States is the most important factor that is in favor of immigrants.
I'd love to I really want to talk about the changing demography, but I have an obligation to read these questions, and we have a couple of more of them coming up. Have you seen immigration policy done well in another country comparable to the United States? So the implication here is that we're not doing it terribly well in the United States and that other countries might be doing it better.
I have a very different perspective. You see, 4 or 5 years ago, I would have agreed with this question. And in fact, I, like most Americans, thought that U.S. immigration system is broken. There are many problems with it. A few years ago, I had a delegation from China. They wanted to ask me about U.S. immigration policy as they were trying to design one for themselves. And I started criticizing the U.S. immigration system, and suddenly the head of the delegation said, how come if the U.S. immigration policy is broken, is so bad, you attract the best and the brightest from the world? How come United States ends up attracting a fifth of all immigrants in the world? It also assimilates them very well. They come here, create corporations, businesses, employment, create employment opportunities. What's going on? So from then on, my discussion with them changed. I started thinking about what is working in the U.S. immigration system and not what's broken. And since then, I've thought a lot about it, and I have found that there are many aspects of U.S. immigration system that are the best in the world. These are the things that rest of the world look at United States enviously. And I like to emphasize that because there's so much negativity going on immigration that we end up thinking that immigrants are to be faulted for that. So we need to accept that U.S. immigration policy has done very well for the United States. And there are parts of U.S. immigration system that the rest of the world is envious about. They want to replicate. And yet, there are parts of U.S. immigration system that need mending, that are broken. I think we need to have a full conversation on this.
Yes, we're running out of time, which is unfortunate. We have a couple more questions. Maybe we can squeeze in the short amount of time that we have. The question here, do you feel there's an efficient way immigrants could plead their case to nationalists and help them comprehend that they are not the source of the problems? So we've got a divide in the United States today is the premise of this question, and we have people now calling themselves nationalists who basically want to keep the others out and keep America for Americans. And we have others of us within the country who think that immigration is a vital part of the history and the future of a thriving America.
Yeah.
Can we talk to each other?
I think we need to talk to each other. What has happened is that liberals who are for immigration and those who are against immigration, they're just talking at each other without addressing, actually listening to each other and accepting some of what the other person is saying. So we need to have, for social workers, one of the question earlier was, what should they do? I think we have to talk about the positive aspect, positive anecdotes of immigration. We have to, the thing is that it's not just immigrants who have to kind of do it for themselves. They have several supporters. There's the interesting thing about this country is that more than half the people actually love immigrants.
Well, this is tough. We have lost the capacity for civil conversation about political issues in the United States. That may be something of an overstatement, but certainly on some of the very big issues. Yeah. And I've talked several times with my students about this, and a number of my students say they don't want to have civil conversation with people who take the other side, that they perceive them as the enemy, that they're out to hurt them, and they see no reason to have a civil conversation with them. I personally am very troubled by that. I gather that you would be too. And maybe we can do something in the school to promote that kind of conversation among people with different points of view. We are just about out of time, and there's one very important question remaining. How do you get the 30% discount on the book?
I think you can go to Columbia University Press website. There's a code there that you can use to get the discount, and it's you can just Google my book, Blaming Immigrants, and
let me hold it up. There it is.
And there'll be a page that gives you a code for the discount.
Very good. So thank you for joining us today. I wish we had more time. I'd love to continue this conversation, and maybe we'll get to do it another time. And thank you for tuning in today. It's great to have you with us, and we hope to see you again, or more, we hope that you'll see us again in 2 weeks when we'll be back, 12 noon.
Thank you.
Thank you.